So what is a compound path or a compound shape, I hear you cry? Well, a compound shape is just a shape that consists of other shapes. It's made up from other shapes. You can create compound paths accidentally, and if you open up Compound Skull Start AI, you can follow along with me. It's in the Shapes folder. And if you open up the top layer here, if you haven't already got your layers showing, just go to the Window menu and open that up. You'll notice that I have a compound path in here. I didn't create that deliberately. It was created through the actions that I did with various tools. So I basically created a letter shape. I then converted it to outlines. I then used the scissors tool to cut it into two sections, added a new piece, and combined it all together using the join tool. I then used reshape on it, and inadvertently I've created a compound shape. So you can create compound shapes without you even knowing it, or you can create them deliberately. Like if I select these paths here, for example, I could decide I want to join them together to create a single shape. Now, when you use the Pathfinder to do that, we're going to use the Pathfinder here. And if you haven't got that showing, go to the Window menu and choose Pathfinder from there. So the Pathfinder uses certain operations to combine shapes together, and it's covered in one of the other movies. But if we click on Unite, it uses the Add mode to add the shapes together. Now, generally, that will just create a path. You'll see here it isn't a compound path because it only has one path to create a single shape. But if we go over to the skull and we select these skull items, and I go to this one, which is using a subtract to subtract shapes from the shape area. So what it will do is subtract the eyes and the nose, which are in front from the skull. Okay, if we have a look, you'll see the nose and the eyes are in front. So by using minus front, we're removing the eyes and nose from the skull. Now that creates a compound path because there's more than one path. Okay, so wherever you see one path cutting a hole in another path, that will be a compound path. And if we go to Cog Start AI, we can see that again here. Here I've created a star, so we can select the star, then select the path above it, which is this circle. And I can use the different shape modes, either Unite to create that kind of shape, Undo, Subtract or minus front to create that shape. And then there's a third one called Intersect. Okay, and you'll notice Intersect just creates a path, but if I undo it, and we hover over it, you'll see Option click to create a compound shape, an intersect shape area. So I can Option click on that and create a compound path. Now the nice thing about that is it leaves me with the original shapes, so if I need to go back and edit it, I can. And that's why you would maybe choose to create a compound shape. If I don't do it, and I just click on that button, I've basically lost the original shapes. If I redo that, and hold down Option or Alt on Windows, I still retain the original shape. So if I want to, I could double click on that, go into isolation mode and make changes to the elements of my compound shape. But let's come back out for a second. In fact, I can just choose my selection tool, select one of the points and make changes to it if I want to. So it just allows for more flexibility by choosing a compound shape. It allows me to make changes to the elements of the shape. So let's continue with that. Let's select that and shift click this one above. And what we're going to do is combine these together. And again, if I hold down the Alt key, it allows me to create a compound shape. Again, giving me access to the individual areas. So I could decide if the circle isn't big enough, I select the circle and just scale it up. And I'm holding down the Alt key and the Shift key. And you'll see I've adjusted my shape without having to go back. It just allows, again, for more flexibility. Again, I'm going to select the path above it, which is this circle, and we're going to do minus front, again, Option clicking to create a compound path. Now, sometimes you'll create a compound path without Option clicking. In this case, because removing this area would naturally create another path. If I click on minus front, oops, making sure I've got them both selected. So Option click, and that's going to remove it and retain it as a compound path. So the nice thing about compound paths is you can get access to all the individual parts of the shape and still make changes to them even after you've intersected them and united them using the Pathfinder. Now, as if by magic, I've opened up cogend.ai, and you can open that too. And in here, I have two versions of my cog. This one was created holding down the Alt key and creating it using compound shapes, which keeps it editable. And this one was created using the Pathfinder without holding down the Option key or Alt key, meaning that it's not really editable any longer. And in order to edit it, the only thing I can do is go to Object, Compound Path, Release, and I only have access to the hole in the middle, because that's the only one that created a compound path without me forcing it to, as I did with this one. So, keeps your art editable and gives you lots of more creative options. If we go back to our compound skull, because I made this without holding down the Option key, I can't easily get into those shapes. I mean, I could release it and then have access to the shapes individually. But a much easier option, if you have created a compound shape by cutting shapes out from each other, is just to go into isolation mode. So if I select one of these paths, so if I select the eyeball, for example, and double click it, I go into isolation mode. And that allows me just to work on this shape on its own. And if I click on one of these shapes, you'll notice I now get a bounding box and I can make changes to the shapes. So that's another way of getting access to a compound shape and making changes to it by going into isolation mode. Once we've done that, we just come out of isolation mode by hitting backspace, and we're back in our layers. So that's a bit about compound shapes and paths and how you can make them accidentally and deliberately and what the benefits are to working with them.